Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis, and before we begin looking at today's top news articles, I would like to announce with huge pleasure that 25th February, that's a Sunday, happens to be the scholarship test. So kindly do the registration for it, because if you get a good score here, you can get up to 90% off, a 90% discount on your course price. So the registrations are closing at early morning, about 6 a.m. itself on 25th February. So please do fill up the form. It could be a golden opportunity before the prelims arrives just a few weeks from now. And on that note, now let's quickly begin by looking at today's top news articles. And we have about 3 news articles that we shall cover in detail from the perspective of UPSC Mains exam, whereas 3 articles are short fact-based articles that we shall be dealing with from prelims perspective. And now without a delay, let me quickly walk you through the first article of the day that has been picked up from page 1 of the Hindu New Delhi edition of today, 22nd February 2024. The first article pertains to international relations, a key topic from GS paper 2. What does the article say? Well, the article talks about Indo-Greek relationship. As you might have guessed, it is due to the ongoing visit of the Greek premier in India right now in New Delhi at the Raisina dialogue that Indo-Greek relationships are getting a major impetus. Now remember that although as the Greek premier is in India right now, there are talks regarding boosting migration, mobility, strategic partnership and doubling bilateral trade by 2030. But this comes in the background of 2023 August, India's Prime Minister, Mr. Modi's visit to Greece. Now he had paid a visit to Greek land while returning from South Africa, as he was attending the 15th BRIC summit in South Africa back in 2023. And during this period itself, it was a major milestone that was set between both the countries. Why? Because Mr. Modi's visit of 2023 to Greece came after 40 years of a huge gap, a long period during which no Indian premier had actually visited Greece, and hence it laid a major milestone, and both the countries decided to leapfrog their relationship from something that is just based on tourism, migration and trade to something that could provide means for much better strategic partnership, enhancing trade partnership, as well as better mobility, better migration, energy and security partnership. And in this regard, let's see what the article actually talks about. Now, as we are aware that both the sides have highlighted that just because for 40 long years there was no high level travel between both the countries, it doesn't mean that the historical cultural ties between the two nations ever weakened. In fact, they became only more strong. Now, let's remember that it was in 2023 when Modi ji visited Greece. That was the point of time when both the countries decided that now is the time to actually take this relationship between India and Greece from purely cultural, based on tourism, historical ties, as well as trade, into something that must be multi-dimensional or multi-sectoral relationship was spoken about. So India-Greek relations are not new. Now, you probably might be aware from your history that Indo-Greeks, in fact, were the first people who had issued gold coins in India. You might have read how they were the first people who actually had issued coins which could be attributed to specific ruler in India. Now, whenever we talk about the northwestern Indian frontier, we talk about the Gandhara art, which is deeply, deeply about Indo-Greek art and architecture style. We are aware of Alexander's invasion into India back in the 326 period, and we also know that how it paved for constant cultural migration relations between the two countries. However, what is new is the more modern diplomatic relations. Now, both the countries realize that although they have had a very deep historical, cultural, linguistic relationship, however, now with the changing realities of modern geopolitical times, with the instability in the West Asian region, given the Israel-Palestine conflict, now is the time both the countries need to take a better step. They need to take a more consolidated step in the direction of multi-sectoral relations, and hence came up all these new agendas. For example, now we are talking about India, European Union free trade negotiation on connectivity partnership. Now, the Greece Premier said that Greece provides a doorway to India's relationship with European Union countries, and India said that if Greece has to have a much better relation with South Asia, then India provides a strategic doorway for Greece to have better relationships with the Asian region. So on that note, the meeting has begun already. And as we are aware, the Greek Premier has come in the Raisina dialogue. Now let's quickly remind ourselves that Raisina dialogue is something that was initiated back in 2016. It is an annual multinational geopolitical and geo-economic dialogue that is held under the aegis of India in New Delhi. The point is that people from media, researchers, industry, they come together and talk about the leading global challenges of today. So the Greek Premier's visit is related to the Raisina dialogue event. And during this event, both the countries have now started speaking about a situation where they are clearly targeting to cover many more areas which they had not before touched upon. For example, the highlights of the meeting say that Greek Premier, Mr. Mitsotakis, he has said that although the ongoing Israel-Palestine war, because of which the Yemen-backed Houthi rebels are constantly attacking the Red Sea region, it has sent ripples of disturbances in not only global supply chain but also in the safety security of the region. Now you might be aware that just 5 days before, a Greek ship that was owned by Greece, Athens, was also attacked by the Houthi rebels. Luckily, there was no injury reported by the passengers, but it did damage the cargo. So in that light, Greece is quite aware and also quite bothered about the unstable situation of the West Asia. But despite this instability, both the countries, India and Greece, said that let us stay committed to promote the concept of India-Middle East Economic Corridor, the IMEC. They also said that they should constantly preserve this idea of making a consistent link of trade and migration, including India, Greece and some other countries of European Union via the West Asian region as the modern day peace project. Now let's remember that back few months before, even Turkey had raised its objections to the IMEC. In fact, the ongoing occupation of Cyprus, the ongoing tussle between Greece and Turkey also talks volumes about how Greece is committed to bolstering and promoting the IMEC. On that note, let's also remember that there is a special link between India and Greece. The very first thing to remember is that India and Greece are nations that have constantly supported each other. For example, Greece has been one nation that has openly come out in support of India on the Kashmir issue. Similarly, let's remember that Greece has constantly also been batting for India's permanent membership to the United Nations Security Council. That has further strengthened the ties. Another thing is that despite the fact that it is being subjected to objections by Turkey, both the countries are strongly committed to better India-European Union trade links, which of course is manifested in the commitment towards IMEC. Apart from that, let's remember that as of now, the Indian diaspora in Greece is huge. Many people of Indian origin are practicing business in Greece. So another agenda of the meeting was to further promote ease of business between the two countries. And this also got manifested on how both the countries said that as of today, the bilateral trade between the two countries stands to be about 83 billion US dollars. However, they only plan to double it by 2030. Right. So therefore, both the countries spoke about a more stable, coordinated and marine law abiding Mediterranean Sea region and the Indo-Pacific region. In fact, both of them also showed commitment to international treaties like the UN clause. Now, also, it is Mr. Mitsotakis who clearly said that despite the war in Gaza, we should not let our commitment towards better ties get weakened. So this is a clear highlight coming from the meeting. Also, they said that let us cooperate in developing and production of military hardware. So now the partnership is exceeding not only to strategic link but also to military cooperation with each other. They also spoke about mobility and migration. In fact, these three were the key agendas of the meeting. Mobility, that is promoting better migration of people between the two countries. Now, the Greece Premier clearly invited people from Indian origin to come and settle in Greece and to do business there. The government is committed to providing much better ease of business and a startup culture of Indian entrepreneurs into Greece. Apart from that, also mobility. Better, clean, efficient energy was also spoken about. And here, Greece has shown its interest in joining the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative that was launched by India. Now let's remember that the IMEC corridor is much in the news. Sometimes people often say that this is the pitch of countries along with India against the Belt and Road Initiative of China that is completely muddled with all sorts of political controversies and the lack of clarity therefore. And hence, let's understand that how during India's chairmanship of the G20 forum, the IMEC corridor was actually initiated by India and many other like-minded countries, including UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, Greece. Now, this is a proposed corridor that shall extend from India to Europe via the West Asian countries. It will consist of many components such as rail links, ship navigation links, road transport links. Besides, it is then consisting of two sub-aspects, two sub-segments. The first segment is the East Corridor that talks about connecting India to the Arabian Gulf region. And the second segment talks about connecting Gulf region to Europe. So it's an integrated grid, and no wonder it has been completely criticized by countries like China, who see it as a major threat to their own road, the Belt and the Road Initiative itself. Now, let's remember this IMEC project will consist of a hydrogen pipeline, a super high-speed data cable for better access to internet, and an electricity cable. This project was launched not only to promote better transportation, better communication, better migration between Europe and Asia, and seen genuinely as an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, and therefore both the countries are talking about how they will further create a scenario where India-Greece can go back to the same strength as they had experienced at a point of time when there was a complete cultural amalgamation between India and Greece. So practically that's what the article talks about. And on that note, let's proceed with the second article from the perspective of UPSC Mains. And this has been picked up for you from page number 8, relevant to social justice. The article says that elections are coming. And whenever the election comes, it is the time of raining manifestos. That's the language of the article. It says, comes the election and come the manifestos. Every political party is pitching its own political manifesto. They are promising all sorts of things to the people. But how much of that is actually accomplished is a question that the article has asked in reference to the health system of India. So therefore, the article first makes a comparison between the achievements done by the previous UPA government and then the incumbent NDA-led government. The article says that both had different approaches. Let's talk about the UPA government. Now, the UPA government had done a major initiative, and that was in the form of National Rural Health Mission that was launched in India to provide last mile or grassroots level health services to rural poor community. Let's remember that the entire scheme of accredited social healthcare activists or ASHA had also got a major push during the same time when the government spoke about creating a set of workers who will go door to door and campaign about primary healthcare, hygiene, sanitation, family planning, pulse polio, and reproductive health care. That was a major achievement, let's not deny that. About 5,000 technical people were trained, they were engaged, and many community healthcare workers got employment. So it was a good step. Now, therefore, the UPA government also had introduced first social health insurance program covering about 80% of the population, initially in Andhra Pradesh, and then it was, of course, spread to 13 other states of India. Let's talk about what different was the step taken by NDA-led incumbent government. So the NDA, it did one major change. It removed the Medical Council of India, the MCI, and it replaced it by the National Medical Commission, the NMC, which is a much bigger umbrella body that takes care of not only medical curriculum, but also the provision of the decentralization of medical services across cities and villages. Right. Now, let's also understand that there are few other things that the NDA government had done which need appreciation. We must appreciate that, which is it strengthened rural infrastructure. It spoke about social health insurance. Now, let's not forget about the PMJAY, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which people also call as Ayushman Bharat. Which is probably one of the largest government-sponsored health insurance scheme in any country, meant for the poor. Also, now it is covering many more vulnerable segments, including from 2020, the transgender population also. That's a good thing. But let's understand that even when the NDA government did a major contribution by starting additional 317 medical colleges in India and doubled the admission into medical colleges by more than 1 crore. All these achievements are in place. But there have been gaps, whether you talk about the NDA government or the previous UPA government, they did their own achievements. But there is a major grey area that is existing in India's healthcare system. So what grey area is this as per the article? As per the article, one of the biggest problems that is that both the governments gave too much importance to tertiary and secondary healthcare. Now, when we talk about secondary and tertiary healthcare, we talk about diseases which need hospitalization, diseases which need a surgical intervention. So, too much importance was given. Apart from that, to promote tertiary and secondary healthcare, the government also induced the PPP model, the public-private partnership model, and not only that, the government also allowed too much privatization in healthcare. This did take care of the needs of the elite segment of society. The rich people could access now best of medical healthcare for hospitalization, for non-communicable diseases, burden, all of that is there. But what about the major and the most neglected aspect, primary healthcare? What about that? Now, primary healthcare happens at the very first level, at the initial level of healthcare system, where people are not only diagnosed for basic diseases, they are also screened for them. They are given counseling and basic medication for them. Primary healthcare would include vaccination, therefore. It would include reproductive healthcare also. What about this segment? This is a segment that has been consistently neglected because there are not too many private companies that have invested in the private healthcare. It continues mostly to be done by the government, and hence there is a huge laggardness there. The quality services are yet not available. This is something that the article complains. Also, the article complains about one more thing. It says that just compare with other developed countries where the total GDP allocation of healthcare is more than 5%. And now look at India. Now, it is abysmal to note that today in India's healthcare system, we say that not even 3% has been allocated to the healthcare in the GDP. In fact, right when the interim budget 2024 was being laid out by the finance minister, it was from the Healthcare Providers Association of India that they actually started demanding. They were fighting the government that please allow at least 2.5% of GDP to healthcare in the financial year 24. Talking about financial year 21, it was as low as 1.6. Even when it rose a little bit in financial year 22, it still continued to be barely about 2.2%. So it is way lower than the Asian and the global average. That's also something that the article complains about. The article says that today it is very difficult to bring a major change in India's healthcare because from the colonial times we have inherited a system that is dysfunctional, that's poor, and that is not inclusive of the poor at all. It is very, very poor quality, therefore. It's very, very arbitrary, therefore. Now, other countries, the article has done a quick comparison with other countries, namely Thailand and Turkey. The article says in Thailand, universal health coverage was introduced back in 2000. And it has shown results. It has manifested in a lower infant and maternal mortality. The number of women who die during childbirth, MMR, the number of newborn babies who die immediately upon birth or until the age of 6 months or 1 year, infant mortality rate. So this is completely now reduced in countries like Thailand, where the universal health coverage has paid off. Why? Why has it paid off so well? It has paid off because the government has focused on decreasing financial burden of people by providing universal coverage, by creating a situation where healthcare is in public domain. It is with the government and hence it's very subsidized or sometimes it's for free. So when public delivery system takes care of primary and secondary healthcare, most of the problems are taken care of. The total mortality burden also decreases. Similarly, let's talk about Turkey. Now, back in 2003, Turkey introduced health transformation program under which the government took some radical steps. Now, government doctors were banned from practicing in private, which meant now they have no vested interest. And hence they had to provide the best quality service to the government departments itself, which further decreased the expenditure of people. And it further subsidized healthcare. So therefore, 50,000 hospital beds were increased and number of nurses and doctors were also doubled up. So which means Turkey and Thailand show quite successful models when it comes to healthcare. But then what is missing in India? What are things that we could not achieve? Now let's talk about maternal mortality. Now if Nepal is the country with leading maternal mortality, what about certain states of India? In India today also, we have 38. We have, if world has 38 deaths per 1 lakh births, that's the maternal mortality rate globally. India has 3 times more. Now this is critical, which means that we have not achieved much when it comes to reproductive health, definitely. Reason is simple. Access to primary health is very poor. Secondary health, if privatized, is out of affording capacity of most people. Now agreed, the government has taken initiatives like Janani Suraksha Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Matritva Vandana Yojana, under which girls who were having their first child and who belonged to the BPL, the below poverty line, were given about rupees 6,000 and other important medical supplies and free hospitalization for their first delivery. But that firstly has not reached to poor people across every state. Another major problem is awareness. There is a lack of awareness and transparency. The third problem is religious cultural taboos also exist in India, which still prevent people from seeking medical health care. In fact, there is a very good article in today's Hindu, which we have not covered in detail because once a final decision comes, we will take it up. But it is about how in the northeastern states, repeatedly the governments are introducing a bill that has banned magic healing. So therefore, the government feels that when you talk about magic healing, it is too superstitious. It could in fact be an attempt to convert one community into another religion. So therefore, the government is discouraging these practices, and the government feels, as per the data, most people are not going for hospital care, medical care, because they feel their cultural and religious taboos are stopping them from doing it. In this regard, that article also works wonderfully well. So same thing is happening here as well. There are taboos which have prevented Indian women to take reproductive health care. That is one seen also when you talk about India. Hence, we know that primary and secondary infrastructure is weak. There is a shortage of human resources, true. Apart from that, states such as Bihar, for example, as per the article, still have one doctor who is taking care of 20,000 patients. That is way poor when you talk about the recommended WHO, World Health Organization, standard ratio. Similarly, in India, as we say, privatization has taken care of health problems, but typically in the tertiary sector where you take care of surgeries or other kind of intrusive interventions, but not on the ground level at all. So 95% of ailments and diseases which can be taken care of at the primary and secondary level are not taken care of, and therefore most people in India fall critically sick of diseases that could have been prevented if right diagnosis was given at a cheaper price. That's what the article talks about. So what are the challenges that we can face in future if we do not mend our ways? The biggest problem is lack of political will. Let's admit that today, when we are highly obsessed with privatized, high-end global medical healthcare. Now, let's remember India today is the top destination for medical tourism. Not only do people come here for all sort of ailments, like heart surgeries, kidney transplantations, but also for cosmetic procedures. But all of that then gets into the tertiary healthcare domain. What about the primary and secondary healthcare? It is quite abysmal to note that the domestic population is suffering with a lack of primary healthcare. The government-run primary healthcare centers are in a very dilapidated state. Poor apparatus, lack of nursing staff, lack of doctors, poor bed availability per 10 patients, lack of standard vaccination, ultimately very poor hygiene. So these are certain things that we must talk about as per the article. Also, when the government is emphasizing so much on digitization today, let's understand that the digitization is also being utilized by the private healthcare providers, not really the government-run municipal hospitals or the primary healthcare centers run by the government, and hence they do not reach everyone. Also, let's understand that we need to change the medical curriculum also. What the prospective doctors are taught in medical colleges also has to change. Now, one such recommendation was made back in 1959 by the Mudaliar Committee. It was recommended here in this Mudaliar report that we must encourage our doctors to go and do some ground service in rural areas, either temporary camps or by setting up primary healthcare centers in every remote village where doctors from urban areas or peri-urban areas have to mandatory go and serve. Today, some colleges are actually doing that. They have involved about 6 months rural service in the curriculum, but not all private colleges have still signed up for this kind of an initiative. Similarly, let's ban dual practice like Turkey had done. Let's not allow government doctors to have their private practice, because once you do that, they are more lured into private procedures, and hence not only is there a lack of transparency, there is also a higher burden on the population. So the biggest problem therefore in India today happens to be out-of-pocket expenditure. What is out-of-pocket expenditure? It means that since we do not have a universal medical insurance, since healthcare is privatized and too expensive for most people, whenever a disease or a problem comes, for example COVID pandemic, for example the recent KFD disorder that is spreading in Karnataka, Kerala, in the forest areas, or measles, say for example. People have to spend out of their pockets. They have to just squeeze out their liquidity. They have to pay in cash. They have to pay out through their cash flow to meet the healthcare expense. And that is something that's a major problem in India. That not only leads to people avoiding healthcare, it leads to people actually getting more poor. The incidence of poverty further shoots up on the poor population because of a very high out-of-pocket expenditure. And hence, let us talk about building better capacity development at the skill level, right into the district clinics and district doctors. So we need better skilled staff, not only nursing staff, also better skilled doctors who are prepared to face the challenge of rural healthcare. That's very important. Most doctors are today excited about mRNA technology, vaccine development, but how many of them are willing to actually show interest to serve primary healthcare sector, particularly in rural segment? So that is something we must question. Every state has a different capacity, agreed. Every state has a different fertility rate, and hence every state has a different need for reproductive healthcare, vaccination. Plus, every state has a different burden of non-communicable diseases like cancer, cardiac arrest, and organ transplant. So these are something that has to be customized as per the state's necessity. That's very important. Apart from that, if the primary healthcare is good, we can reduce the level of hospitalization by 30%. Now here there is also a lack of transparency by private insurance providers. Most of the times, people who can afford, they take private insurances. Now these insurance policies, rather than encourage hospitalization. The more serious the case, the better they are ready to pay. So that is something that we must tackle also, that most problems are lifestyle oriented. Typically when you talk about NCD burden of today, diabetes or cardiovascular, or you talk about problems such as your digestive healthcare issues, all these could be tackled with primary intervention. So let us focus here to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure in the Indian population, given the fact that we slowly are losing our demographic dividend. Today Indian population is very young, but as per the United Nations Development Program, by 2041 things will change. Our population will slowly and steadily become grey population. We will become aging population. In that case, the burden of diseases will only shoot up. So are we prepared to face that kind of burden? If yes, that's probably the answer to the modern day health crisis. Also, let's understand not only the old people. Today, young Indians are also suffering from multi-morbidities, which means a mix of various chronic diseases. Now, chronic disease is a disease that lasts for a very long time. It comes slowly and it stays back with you. Now, insulin resistance, diabetes, or for that matter, certain kinds of kidney disorders, autoimmune diseases could be a very important example here. So, in this case, we must quickly work upon improving availability of healthcare to the lowest common denominator, whether it's diagnostic, whether it's easy, cheap drug provision. Alright. In fact, the other day we had spoken in the Hindu analysis about how the drug prices will increase in India if compulsory licensing is removed. So it's good if you revise that also once, because in case India signs up for removing the compulsory licensing and does not allow a replication of medicines that are patented in US and Europe, again that could mean a massive health crisis for the country. A very related article indeed. And now let's check the article on page 9. This pertains to your ecology. Of late there have been tremendous articles in the newspapers. It's been everywhere in the news that how animal-human conflict has suddenly soared in particularly the Western Ghat region of India. The reason being, animals are getting deprived of their habitation and they are experiencing something that can be referred to as habitat fragmentation. Now, habitat fragmentation happens when animals who are endemic to a particular forest, animals who are used to living in a particular forest or in a particular ecosystem, they find themselves in a very difficult situations and isolated from each other, from one animal group to other, from one forest area to another, because constantly in between this endemic forest region, people are creating infrastructure, highways, commercial settlements, residential areas, roads. They are wiring these regions, and hence today we are in a situation where although human population is bursting, it is completely penetrating through the forests that were initially reserved for animals. So today what will they do? Automatically there is a more confrontation between wild animals and humans, creating a constant battle of tussle between the both. And it is manifested in the very commonly happening deaths, where elephants have come on a rampage, they have destroyed crops, they have killed humans, they have trampled everything that comes in their path. The villagers resort to complaining to the local police authorities, forest guards, and the forest police. The resultant is either the elephant is shot, or sometimes it gets injured, or maybe the animosity, the enmity between the wildlife and humans is only increasing rather than decreasing. And hence the article says the undeclared war with nature, that is between humans and nature. The recent article has been picked up particularly in the backdrop of Wayanad in Kerala, because in Wayanad there has been a constant increase of cases where animals have been coming and humans are getting killed. Now recently was a 47-year-old farmer who was trampled to death by an elephant. And in this regard, let's break down the article. What is the main problem that the article is talking about? What is our main concern? Well, the main concern is that in the Western Ghat region, as we said, human-animal tussle has further intensified. It's becoming too severe now. For example, from the period of 2017 to 2023 itself, about 20,957 cases happened in which crops were damaged because of wild animal attack. About 1,500 cases of domestic animals like cattle, cows, buffaloes, or sheep or goats being taken away or killed by the animals. Apart from that, 7,000 plus applications are still waiting to be attended in the government offices regarding complaints filed by the poor people about a family member being dead, being killed, property or crop getting lost because of constant wild animal incursion. So if this is the problem, then the article questions what is at the root of the problem? What could be the root cause of the problem? Well, the cause of the problem is, let's have a look at the data quickly to understand that. Now, there was a study, there was a report which was named Rite of Passage Elephant Corridors of India. This was conducted by the Wildlife Trust of India back in 2005. Okay, it said that in India we have total 88 elephant corridors at that point of time in 2005. But as per the report, 24% of the corridors were under reserve forest and 76% were under forest, which means they were under some kind of human-induced vegetation. It could be agriculture, it could be just an orchid, a forest, a garden or a human settlement. So where are we leaving space for the animals completely? Where are these areas, the exclusive domain or the territory of wild animals anymore? And fast forward to 2024, the number of wildlife corridors, elephant corridors from 88 has completely slashed down to about half. There is a huge reduction in elephant corridors. This is despite Project Elephant, despite Operation Jumbo, despite Wildlife Act 1972, despite the IUCN status on Asian elephants. Despite that, we are seeing the situation where just because human population is on the rise, there are two problems which the article basically highlights. One is completely demographic. If human population will consistently increase, the biggest result is the humans will penetrate into wildlife areas. The second aspect of the problem is because of poor nature of soil in India, because of poor agriculture output in India. Constantly people are expanding into new territories for growing more crops. Now this is a very, very deep problem. It is not just that agriculture output is low, hence we need to find new areas. It's not as straight as that. The problem is that we, typically after the Green Revolution of 1960s, have induced an agriculture that is completely dependent on, say, pesticide, fertilizers, foreign variety of crops, and inculcating minimum support price on crops like wheat, rice, oil, and certain pulses only. Still, very few states, now Kerala was a rare example where MSP had been given on vegetables. Apart from that, for a very, very long time in India, unless the new wave of awareness came in the form of millet consumption, for a very long period, Indian agriculture was solely dependent on these crops, which led to repeated use of soil, repeated contamination of soil, no enrichment. And hence it led to alkalization of soil eventually. It also led to contamination of groundwater eventually. In this case, today when the soil is not fertile or productive enough, people actually are just going and digging up forests to find more fertile soil. Now, very ironically, this reminds you of the jamming agriculture that tribals in the northeast practice, But that is not dangerous. Why? Because once they burn after finishing the use of a particular area of land, the burning itself once again regenerates some kind of minerals in soil, like potash and carbon. But here that's not happening. They are just abandoning the barren lands and proceeding to find new ones. But what is the mistake of wild animals here? Every time you leave behind a land barren, it cannot be used by a human, then how will it be used by an animal? And where you are going to find a new land, that happens to be the habitation of these animals. So naturally, there is a better physical interaction. There is an easy physical interface between the animals and the humans. Obviously, it will result in crisis as per the article. Now, apart from that, not only for agriculture, we are also expanding our highways. We are expanding human tea estates. All these anthropogenic reasons. Anthropogenic are human-made reasons of penetrating into wildlife. So there has been a significant loss of ecological habitat. What happens now? Whenever we are entering into a wildlife habitat, as the picture here demonstrates, we are creating corridors in between. And the corridors, they run. Say for example, a street or a highway that is going through a forest. Now this has divided the land in which elephants were moving freely once, in search of water, in search of communication with each other herds. If you stop that, what happens? They will, because of thirst, hunger, lack of movement, come and attack the passerbys, and that is exactly the complaint that's happening in Wayanad also. So although the government has given focus on creating corridors like that, elephant corridors, so that they can move easily, but they are a very temporary solution. They are a very superficial solution, because it's almost like you are directing the movement of wild animals, which should not be directed by humans. It should be free. It is very intrinsic. It is based on nature. You are disturbing that rhythm. So that is something that people need to understand. So therefore, the main reasons are monoculture plantation. Now, when we are doing monoculture, what happens because of monoculture? Monoculture is opposite of polyculture. In polyculture, you are growing different type of crops together. It's called intercropping also. What happens? If you grow one crop and then you intercrop it with a legume crop, like farmers used to do before the Green Revolution on a perpetual basis, it leads to natural fertilization of soil. It leads to nitrogen fixing of the soil. It leads to a soil that is much more rich in enzymes and much more productive. But then when you talk about plantation and monoculture, you are only growing one crop because you get a minimum support price on that. As a farmer, it's beneficial for you. It's easy to maintain. It is something that gives you better profit in the market eventually. You are talking about bulk production, mass production. But what is the downside? The downside is that this monoculture will erode your crop of all its fertility. It will take 10 years to recharge. You don't have that much time. So you keep on abusing the same soil. Eventually it will become fallow, barren. You will abandon it and you will proceed and find some other crop. And that's exactly what's happening. And hence you end up penetrating in a wildlife area. Plus there is a use of pesticides, insecticide constantly. So therefore the total yield of food crop and cash crop has consistently declined over years and years. So what happens? Because of loss of greenery, because of loss of extensive forest and huge water bodies, animals are in distress. Indeed, this is further worsened by mining. Now most regions of Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand and Bihar, and Odisha, earlier these were tribal belts completely. But today if you see, there is mining going on rampantly. Plus there is also an extensive use of silica. Silica mining also has become increasingly common. Apart from that, graphite mining. Now let's remember, India is one of the major contributors in graphite mining. Silica. What happens? Not only does the nearby soil become alkalized, people are also constantly digging and creating holes in the land. Plus, once you do that, the land is not fertile anymore, and hence it is also unfit for animals to come and graze. So therefore, it is constantly a vicious cycle, and apart from that, the booming tourism. Now, the article has used a very beautiful word. It says revenge tourism. Because during the COVID pandemic, people used to joke that now humans are in lockdown, but animals are having a good time. And it was true also. The total green cover rose, animal movement improved, olive lily turtles were fertilizing better in Odisha. All these were examples that if anthropogenic reasons recede, nature takes its place and it prospers. But it was a short-lived pleasure for wildlife, because once the lockdown was over, people started traveling in triple amount. They were traveling much more than before. This is revenge tourism. Revenge ecotourism, to be more precise. So therefore, every sanctuary, every national park, the vicinity has been changed into a commercial area. Consistent use of plastic, consistent pollution, consistent noise pollution, consistent light pollution. This completely changes the reproduction pattern of animal, the communication pattern of animal, overall health of the animal. So once the animals are so distressed, it is true that they will come and attack. Then they will also do the revenge tourism. They will come and hit back on human population. Let's remember that. It's a two-way process. Also, now there has been a situation where native trees have been replaced by invasive species and artificial trees. For example, eucalyptus trees. It is not just happening in South India. Back since British times, even in Uttarakhand hills, Himalayas, the timber forests were removed and eucalyptus was put in place. Here also, when you talk about the Brahmagiri hills, Karnataka, a hotspot of diversity, biodiversity, the Bansura hills, the Chembra hills, in all these regions of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, eucalyptus plants have been replaced. Eucalyptus has replaced the local plants. This, once again, denies food and grazing right to the animal. So therefore, what's happening? Now, under Operation Jumbo, elephants are then taken and transported into a safer place. But how much of transportation will you do? Eventually, this further leads to crisis. Also, let's remember that in one of our Hindu analysis, we had also spoken about the unique species of elephants that are used in many states of India. You know, they act as friends of human beings and they tackle the human-animal conflict. Now, if you remember which species am I talking about, do post it in your comment. It will be nice to know that you remember something that we had discussed. Which species of that are trained by humans to take care of animal-human conflict? Let me know. Okay, so that's exactly what the article talks about, that we must stop this tragedy from happening and the government must therefore today create a statutory body. A body that is created by law under the parliament to coordinate forest issues and also to coordinate with the Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It should be happening on a multi-stakeholder basis where local NGOs, local farmers, panchayats should be involved. People should be made to understand the ramifications of this battle with wildlife and hence better preventive actions, Also, we must talk about the Forest Conservation Act. This should be strictly enforced with first prior informed consent of the people and then strict laws should be made so as to prevent human intervention into wildlife areas. So this is what the article talks about, and with that let's proceed with quick Prelims Bytes. And the first article for Prelims we are talking about is page number 12. It says, as a good news to sugarcane croppers, the central government has increased the FRP. The central government has increased the FRP rating for sugarcane, which shall be implemented from October 1st onwards. Now, this comes as a good news because constantly, as we know in the North India, farmer protest is happening. And even much before that, the sugarcane croppers have been complaining to the government that the output has been reducing because of erratic rainfall, because of change in weather patterns owing to climate problems, climate change. So therefore, if the output is less, they are not able to get a fair price in the market. Keeping that in mind, the government has listened to their demand and hence increased the fair and remunerative price on sugarcane. Now, the government often gives MSP, minimum support price, on certain crops. But when you talk about sugarcane, it is the FRP that is provided to the farmers. So let's remember, as per the government notification, 8% higher FRP will be given on sugarcane for the current season 23 to 2024, and this has been approved by Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, and today the price has been increased, the FRP has been increased to rupees 340 per quintal. That's a huge jump as compared to the previous year, like more than 8%. Apart from that, sugarcane in India, as we know, is typically grown in Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka. But recently you might have heard in the news that how India, despite being the second largest exporter of sugar, only after Brazil, only with other leading countries like China, had decided to stop exporting its sugar. Now this article is very relevant to that development. Why did India resort to stopping its sugar exports? Same problem. The sugar croppers said that the output is consistently falling down and therefore the domestic demand was not being satisfied. It had led to huge inflationary pressures in the domestic market. To reduce this food inflation, the government decided to stop sugar export completely. Now, let's remember that India exports major sugar, raw cane sugar, to certain countries, specifically Sri Lanka and US. They are one of the largest consumers of this product. Now, talking about the FRP, let's quickly understand few more details. What is FRP? As I said, FRP is almost like a minimum support price that is given to the farmers who grow sugar canes. This is the rate at which sugarcane will be purchased from these farmers, and it is a fixed rate, irrespective of the market up and down. The rate will be fixed, just like MSP. And it will be purchased by the sugarcane mills at this fixed rate. So farmers will not have a loss irrespective of the increasing market price or decreasing market price. Who fixes it? It is fixed by Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, on whose recommendation, please remember for prelims, on the recommendation of Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices, a very popular question. Let's remember that the FRP as a standard rate is determined under the Sugarcane Control Order of 1966, and they use a typical method which accounts many factors together. It does a sum of total cost of sugarcane production, what is the demand in the market, what is the supply rate. So we are talking about both kinds of inflation, the demand oriented and the supply side. Domestic international prices and intercrop price. Once all these factors are taken care of, they calculate the FRP for the farmers. Ultimately, it will assure the farmers of a fixed return, whether the mill will get profit or not. Although sugar mills are now complaining to the government that this is a major hit to them. But despite that, in the light of farmer benefit, the initiative has been rolled out. Now the next prelims is coming from page 12, GS3, pertaining to economy once again. And what does the article say? The article says the government has allowed 100% foreign direct investment in the space exploration sector. A very good news. Why? Because today, India's space industry is one of the leading such in the globe. It is not only providing employment to people, like lakhs of people, it also is bringing massive returns. It is contributing to the GDP like never before. In that light, the government has decided to further boost employment potential, output potential, and performance potential of space sector by allowing private players to come. So here the government says that earlier, this is what the article says actually, the summary of the article is, the main important points are that earlier the foreign direct investment was only allowed with government's permission, almost like the license era that we talk about back in the 1991 period, okay, which was removed with the LPG reforms. Now today it has come to the space sector. Like earlier, FDI could come only with the government approval and permission. But now things have changed. After this 100% amendment that the government has done yesterday, what will happen? Ease of doing business in our country in space sector will get improved. Foreign players will also come. International private foreign investment will also be welcome now. So state-of-the-art equipment is expected. Better production, better manufacture, better sophistication is something that we can now talk about. It will lead to more forex reserves flowing in the country. It will lead to better employment, assured income to people, and overall it will lead to economic development and better space exploration by India. Now this strategy is completely in promise with Indian Space Policy 2023, wherein the government cabinet or the union cabinet has decided to ease the foreign direct investment policy in the space sector and various subsectors. Which are these sectors? Let's talk about. We are talking about 3 sectors here. One, the government says that now 74% of FDI can come directly, automatically without government approval, where in satellite manufacturing and operation, satellite data production, ground segment and user segment. Above 74, of course, government permission might be needed. The next important subsector is launch vehicle and associated subsystems. Creation of space ports for launching and receiving spacecraft. For this subsector, about 49% investment can come directly without government approval automatically. Above that, you need permission. Similarly, 100% foreign direct investment automatically to be allowed now, where in manufacturing components of space exploration, system and subsystem for satellites, and ground segment and user segment. So it is a major move, and let's see how it leads to further bolstering, augmenting of India's space industry. And then to the last article of the day, that's page 14, GS paper 2 social justice relevant article. It talks about how the central government has given about 20 crore rupees fund to make the life of prisoners, rather poor prisoners, easy. Now the government feels that there are many prisoners who are languishing, they are suffering in Indian jails because of some petty crime like theft, robbery or something else, right? Something that is not in a grave criminal nature of crime. So these people are in the prison because they are not able to afford bail. They are not able to pay any fine to the government against a law that they might have broken. And hence the union government has said annually rupees 20 crore will be allocated, and this will be then directed to the heads of the states and union territories so that they can channelize it in the proper way, and these people are offered bail and they are given freedom, and they should not suffer just because they cannot afford to come out of the prison. So they are simply in the prison. Not only is it dangerous for them, not only is it devastating mentally, physically for the prisoners, but also it leads to overcrowding in Indian jails. Already the situation is not very healthy. Now Indian prisons are overcrowded, there is a lack of hygiene, there are repeated molestations and other kind of physical assaults that people complain about. There is a lack of self-employment initiatives that are happening for the prisoners across the prisons. And hence, this is a very important development in that light. We can also associate it with a new era of prison reforms that the government now talks about. So the ministry said that although in 2023 itself, the union government had told the state governments and union territories to take this initiative, but the states have not performed well. They have not done anything substantial in this regard. So now they are saying, let's do it on a priority basis and reach the last mile so that nobody is left behind under the support to the poor prisoner scheme of the government launched back in 2023. So the government has reprimanded the states and the UTs and said that immediately constitute a empowered committee and an oversight committee who will take care of the fact that the money is reaching the right place or not. Now, the National Crime Records Bureau also says that there will be an account that shall be opened in a nationalized bank under the same scheme that we spoke about, support to poor prisoners scheme, and then the money shall be transferred into the right prisons so that the poor people are bailed out. That's simply what the article talks about. It also says that there has to be a help from District Legal Service Authority and prison authorities. It has to be a negotiation so that every case is individually examined and only eligible prisoners should get the benefit. There has to be no corruption in between. That's what the article spoke about practically. And on that light, also do remember that there have been many prison reforms in India for a very long time now. You know that we know about the Mullah Committee. We know about the Krishna Iyer Committee, the Justice Krishna Iyer Committee. So do revise 3 or 4 important committees on prison reforms, because a very prominent question can be expected in GS paper 2, that what has been Indian government initiative regarding prison reforms in India post-independence. And now to practically the last science-based prelims fact for the day. Now astronomers have found something else, something more unique, which is further exciting the field of astronomy, and now they have found out helium stars. Now what are these helium stars? Helium stars are not unique. It's not like people did not know about them. Everybody knew they are there. But now the shocking news is that astronomers from the University of Toronto, after a prolonged 7-year research, have actually found these small, super hot and dense stars that are called as helium stars. They have found about 25 such batches. What are these stars? Now these stars are very hot. They have a very small orbit. And the interesting thing is they are enveloped in helium. They are covered in helium actually. And so far they were elusive. But today, as we have found them, it is opening up some new insights into the era of space exploration. For example, for a very long time, scientists used to get confused about the push and pull theory. What is this? It is believed that, according to Newton's law of gravity, objects which have, say, for example, same mass, they will actually attract each other. All objects with mass, they will attract each other, right? They will attract. But the problem is, when you talk about sun, it has an outer mass, it has an inner layer also. It is deeply concentric circles. Then why does it not happen that the layers are actually getting attracted to each other in such a strong gravitational impact that the sun actually collapses down? Why doesn't it collapse under the push and pull theory? But it doesn't collapse. We know that it is rising every day. It's there for us. So this happens because of another process called nuclear fission reaction. It is this fission reaction between hydrogen and helium that prevents sun from collapsing under its own mass. That's what the article talks about. Then the article says that energy that all particles in sun or in any other known star maintain to be able to exist against the motion of gravity is happening only because of the fission reaction or because of the presence of hydrogen and helium. But the surprising part is that these new stars that the astronomers have found out, they are showing very little trace of hydrogen. Then where is the reaction coming from? So although the reaction is minimal, there is gravity, of course, they are dense, they should collapse. But what will prevent them from collapsing? The fission reaction between hydrogen and helium that maintains an equilibrium. But the problem is, in these new helium stars, there is hardly any hydrogen. They are heavily overdosed with helium. So then in that case, what should we call them? Should we call them a supernova, which is soon ready to explode? It happens when fission reaction stops, there is no more fusion fission going on, and under gravity, a star will blow up as a supernova. So will these stars burst as a supernova? Are they all dying stars? So this is one biggest question that has now arisen now that the astronomers have found these helium stars. So typically, astronomers are saying that we will classify them into 3-4 classes, and these new 25 stars belong to class 1, class 2 and class 3. Talking about class 1, they are the ones who have no hydrogen and they are very rich in helium. Class 2, they have very low mass and they are not as bright as common stars. Now the third ones will be those actually who do not emit any ultraviolet radiation. So these are certain investigations that are still taking place, but these do present a very unique model to the typically expected model of a star, where it is the reaction between these two gases which holds the star together. And now let's proceed with today's important questions for the mains. The first question says, what structural changes are needed in Indian healthcare system to make it more inclusive? When we say inclusive, we say more democratic, more participative from the people who are at the bottommost segment, those who are economically weak or socially vulnerable. So why is it not including the economically deprived segments, or why doesn't it cater the poor in India? So let's talk about all the problems that we discussed. Problem of primary health, problem of government-induced primary health, lack of private participation in primary health, only importance being given to privatization of secondary tertiary health. Let's talk about the high out-of-pocket expenditure and poor awareness regarding health insurance for a majority of the population, despite programs like Ayushman Bharat, who are now there to cater to the BPL community, the people who are below poverty line. Let's talk about why do we have such a poor doctor-patient ratio. Let's talk about why do we have such a poor awareness regarding the schemes that the government has generated. So this article will provide you good inputs here. The second question, why are the instances or cases of human-animal conflict on a consistent rise in India? Suggest measures to tackle the problem. So when somebody says that you have to suggest, you could talk about the government interventions, you could talk about your own creative interventions, or a mix of both. Now, why are these cases on the rise? We just spoke about it. Not only does it mean increasing demographic pressure, increasing population, that's a physical consequence, or more deep consequences, rising alkalinity or rising barrenness of soil. We spoke about it. Because of overdose of fertilizer, pesticide, monoculture, people constantly migrating in search of new spots. Again, ecotourism, revenge tourism, that happens as a two-way process. We spoke about that. Let's talk about the overcrowding that happens in natural ecosystems. Let's talk about how, despite the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Elephant Conservation Act, Elephant Corridor Project, there is hardly any specific area left for wildlife. It is all covered under reserved forest. It is all covered under forested areas, agriculture areas. So we can mention some of these things, including the measures. Like I asked you a question, which species of elephant can play a role here? You could talk about that species. You could talk about certain other initiatives that can be taken to prevent from this problem. You could talk about making more massive corridors, right? Or creating an integrated habitation for animals, so anything of that sort. And on that note, I take your leave on today's session. See you soon with another very exciting session. Thank you so much.